Hello, and welcome to Let's Make a Character. I'm Paul Stefko. This week, I am going to be making a character using a class and level based system. I've been doing point buy for the last few weeks, and I decided I wanted to try something out different, so I put up a poll on Monday asking folks what system that uses class and level based character creation should I use. And the options I gave were Blue Rose First Edition, which introduced the True 20 rule system, which was a streamlining and condensing of the D20 system of 3rd Edition Dungeons and Dragons. Fantasy Age, which is a generic version of the rules created for the Dragon Age tabletop RPG based on the Dragon Age computer games. Labyrinth Lord, which is part of the OSR movement, the Old School Renaissance, or there's some debate over what the R stands for, but it's a retro clone of early editions of Dungeons and Dragons. And Owl Hoot Trail, which was sort of the odd duck out, which it's a sort of steampunky fantasy western game from Pelgrane Press that technically also uses a very, very streamlined version of D20, but it's a personal favorite of mine, so I threw it in there. And as you can see, Fantasy Age won by quite a margin. So then on Tuesday, I listed the 3 classes that are available in the Fantasy Age game and asked folks which one I should make. And the choices were Mage, Rogue, and Warrior. And as you can see, Mage won there. So then on Wednesday, I asked about races. There are a number of races in Fantasy Age, but I narrowed it down to 4 just to make the polling a little bit easier. So the options I gave were elf, gnome, human, and orc. And as you can see, orc won by quite a bit. And then finally, I asked what arcana or area of magical specialization would this orc mage take to. And in fact, I was actually looking for the top 2 because a starting mage character in Fantasy Age gets 2 Arcana to start with. So as you can see here, the winners were the Heroic Arcana followed by Fire. So those are going to be the 2 Arcana that this character has to work with. So let's get started, shall we? So I've got the Fantasy Age rulebook, and I've got my character started, and I've also got a little dice roller program because Fantasy Age uses randomized character creation, and I'm going to need to roll some dice for it. So we'll start off. Fantasy Age has a nice little breakdown, making a character in 9 easy steps. Step 1, create a character concept, which I did with the help of you lovely people out there on the internet. And so it's going to be a orc mage that specializes in the heroic and fire arcana. Next, I'm going to determine my ability scores. There are 9 ability scores in Fantasy Age, and they are accuracy, which represents your character's physical precision and skill with finesse and ranged weapons, such as bows and rapiers. Communication covers your character's social skills, personal interactions, and ability to deal with others. Constitution is your character's fortitude and resistance to harm. Dexterity encompasses your character's agility, hand-eye coordination, and quickness. Fighting is your skill at combat with heavier weapons, such as axes and spears. Intelligence is a measure of your character's smarts, knowledge, and education. Perception covers all of the senses and the ability to interpret sensory data. Strength is your character's physical prowess, and willpower encompasses mental toughness, discipline, and confidence. So I've just jotted down the abbreviated forms there. Now there's a table for determining these abilities, and by the rules as written, you roll 3d6, 3 6-sided dice, and you consult the table, and that gives you the starting ability, which is a modifier between -2 and 4. -2 being very rare, 4 also being very rare because 3d6 gives you that lovely bell curve, and those are the extremes, so those come up very, very rarely. So, you roll 3d6 in order for each of the ability scores. So I'll roll 3d6 and consult the table. That will be my modifier for accuracy. Then I'll do it again for communication, and then constitution, and so on. So, my first roll, get 5, 4, and 4, which is a total of 13, which means I have a +2 in accuracy. An 8 gives me a +0 in communication. Ooh, a 14 also gives me a +2 in constitution, so already very hearty orc mage. 14 again gives me a +2 in dex. Ooh, there we go. There's an 8, which is still a +0 in fighting. This guy is not going to be going hand to hand, which still makes sense. 12 in intelligence. That's good. That gives me a +2. Perception, I have a 14. That's also a +2. 13 gives me a +2 in strength. And in 11 gives me a +1 in willpower. So, I'm actually going to skip ahead and take a look at my character class, which is Mage, and take a look at the primary abilities and the secondary abilities, which are listed for the class. The primary abilities are going to be the ones that are most important for this character. So they are accuracy, intelligence, perception, and willpower. And luckily, I've got +2s in accuracy, intelligence, and perception, and a +1 in willpower. Now, going back to the character creation steps and determining my abilities, the last line in that section says, when you are done, you may swap any 2 abilities. This gives you a chance to customize your character a bit. Now, I could just leave this character the way it is. I've got pretty good scores in all of the areas that I really need to have them in. But I actually think that I am going to swap my strength and my willpower so that I have a +1 in strength and a +2 in willpower, just to shore up that last primary ability a little bit. Moving on, there's a section on ability focuses, which are kind of like skills or specializations within the 9 ability scores. But I don't actually assign any of those at this stage, so I'm just going to ignore them for now and move on. Next, we get to the races, and I already know that I'm going to be playing an orc, so I'm just going to scroll right down to the orc section. And go down to the section down here that says playing an orc. If you choose to play an orc, modify your character as follows. Hey, add 1 to your strength ability. So my strength is going to go back up to 2, even though I swapped it down for a lower number. It's going right back up again. Now, here's where I actually get to assign focuses. I get to choose either Constitution, Stamina, or Strength, Might. So the question I need to ask is this orc mage particularly tough and able to go for a long time without tiring, or is this a very strong and mighty orc mage? And I think I like the idea of stamina better. I like the idea of an orc mage who likes to do long rituals and whatnot, even though the game doesn't actually mechanically support that at this time. Fantasy Age is still a relatively new system. But I'm going to take the stamina focus for Constitution. I just note that on the line right after Constitution in parentheses. In addition, I have Dark Sight, which allows me to see up to 20 yards in total darkness without a light source. So I'm making a note of that just down at the bottom. Then I have a speed of 10 plus my dexterity, so my speed is 12. I have the Orcish language, and I speak the Common Tongue. Now, Fantasy Age, the core rulebook, does not present a specific fantasy setting in which to play, so the languages that they give are fairly generic. They have them for each of the races, and then they have a common tongue, and then they say that the GM is responsible for coming up with any others that they may want. But for now, I'm just going to stick to what's presented in the book. I speak and read Orcish and Common. There's no prejudice against orcs saying that they have to be illiterate, and in fact, none of the races get any negatives right out of the box, so everyone is just as cool as everyone else. Now, the last part for playing an orc and the racial modifiers therein is that I will roll twice on the orc benefits table for additional benefits, and that is a 2d6 roll. So I'm going to come back to my dice roller, and I'm going to roll 2d6, so that gives me a 10. So on 10 to 11, I gain the accuracy brawling focus. So that means I'm going to go up here. A little bit of the sweet science. And then, okay, I rolled an 11, which gives me the same thing, so I have to re-roll. And if I get the same result twice, it's also an 11. 9. I am proficient in the Bludgeons weapon group. Now that has an asterisk. It says if the class you choose provides this already, you can take the Focus Fighting Bludgeons instead. So I'm going to check with Mage. They do not have the Bludgeons weapon group. They get Brawling and Stabs. So I am going to add weapon group Bludgeons. That means clubs and maces and things. Then I will go back to the orc, and I have now rolled twice on the orc benefits table and gotten all of that, so I'm done with the orc. Now I get to determine my character's background, which consists of 2 steps. First, I will roll randomly for the social class, which will eventually determine how much money I get to purchase starting equipment. But it also will tell me what table to roll on for my actual background. So first, I will roll 1d6 on the social class table, and I get a 2. So I am lower class. Now I go to the next page where the tables are, and I look at lower class, and that is also a 1d6 roll. So I'm going to roll that, and I get a 6. So my lower class background is tradesperson. So that lets me choose either the communication bargaining focus or the intelligence evaluation focus. Now looking at my ability scores, I have a +0 communication, I have a +2 intelligence. Now I could either choose communication bargaining, which would shore up my low communication a little bit and say that I'm not great at talking to people, but I'm fairly good when I'm trying to strike a deal. Or I could take intelligence evaluation and say I'm smart, and I'm really smart when it comes to determining how much things are worth. I think that I will go with communication bargaining, because I like the idea of this character being not great with people, but forceful in a negotiation when it comes to business. So I'm going to shore up his, not really a deficiency, it's a +0, so that's, average for a normal person. It's below average for an adventurer, but not everyone is great at everything. And that gives me the single focus for my background. And that will let me move on to my class. And my class is Mage. Now, just going through, I already looked at my primary abilities and my secondary abilities. Those are good for letting you know what's important to the character at character creation, but they don't really come into play again until you level up. So I don't really need to focus on them any further. Now, the next line is starting health. I have a number of health points equal to 20 plus my constitution bonus, which is a +2, plus a d6 roll. So let's go ahead and roll a d6. I get a 1, of course. So I'm going to have a total of 23 health. Not that great, but he'll survive. He's a mage. He's hopefully not going to be up in there with a bunch of damage-dealing monsters. In addition to my bludgeons weapon group that I get for being an orc, I also have brawling and stabs. So those are the weapons that I'll be able to use with any sort of proficiency. Now I go to my class powers section and I get everything that is listed under level 1. So first thing we have Arcane Blast. And it says if you are holding your arcane device, which is the next class power, but they reference it ahead of time, you can make a special ranged attack that damages foes with a blast of magical energy. This is resolved like a normal ranged attack, so stunts are possible. And I'll talk about stunts once we're done as a little overview of the system. But the attack roll is an accuracy arcane blast test, so it is possible for me to gain a focus with arcane blast, but I don't have one yet. But I do have a pretty good accuracy. An Arcane Blast has a range of 16 yards and inflicts 1d6 plus willpower damage. And my willpower is +2, so it will do 1d6 plus 2 damage. This requires no magic points, which, again, I'll get to when we get down to the magic points class power. But I'm just going to, for now, write class powers. And then I'm going to put Arcane Blast. So I get +2 to hit with it, because that's my accuracy. And it does 1d6 plus 2 damage. And its range is 16 yards. Now, Arcane Device. Each mage has an arcane device through which they can focus magical energy. Its primary use is the channeling of arcane blasts, but it is used with certain spells as well. The exact nature of the arcane device differs from mage to mage. It could be a staff, wand, holy symbol, amulet, etc. You should decide what form your arcane device takes when you make your character. If you lose your arcane device, you can attune a new one to you by spending 1 hour and 5 magic points to do so. So I'm going to write arcane device, and I'm going to say that it's a staff. Just because, nice and classic. Magic training. This is the most important of the mage's powers. It allows a mage to cast the spells that are the hallmark of the class. You begin with 2 magic talents and 4 spells. See Chapter 5, Magic, for more information about choosing and casting spells. So, this was already determined. I'm going to have the Fire and Heroic Arcana. So, Fire Arcana is right here. So I get the novice level of the Fire Arcana, which says you learn the spells Arcane Lantern and Flame Blast. So I'm going to put talent Fire Arcana. And then I'm going to put a spells section, and it says that I know Arcane Lantern, which is a light spell. You illuminate the area around you with a steady light similar to that of a lantern. And I know Flame Blast, which basically creates a line of fire out about 8 yards and about 2 yards wide, and anyone hit with it takes 2d6 plus 1 damage. They get to make a Dexterity Acrobatics test against my spell power, which is based on my stats and things, to only take 1d6 plus 1 damage. And then I also get the Heroic Arcana at Novice level. which says that I know Hero's Inspiration and Hero's Might. Hero's Inspiration gives a bonus to the next ability test that the targets make. I can choose a number of targets equal to my willpower, so 2. They have to be within 6 yards of me when I cast it, but then they can move around freely and still get its effects. And they get a +2 bonus on the next ability test they make, no matter what it is. If they haven't used that bonus by the end of the encounter, it's lost, and I can designate myself as one of the targets. So the heroic Arcana spells are buff spells. So my guy, in addition to being a fire mage, is also a buffer. Hero's Might increases all of the target's damage. So I can again pick a number of targets equal to my willpower, so 2. They have to be within 6 yards of me when the spell is cast, but then they can move around. It's the same rule as Hero's Inspiration. And until the end of the encounter, the targets gain a +1 bonus to damage when making melee and ranged attacks, and I can designate myself as one of the targets. So those are my 4 spells that I am able to cast. To cast them, I make an ability check, and my brain is telling me that it is intelligence, but I'm just going to double check that. Yes, it is intelligence. And you can get focuses in any of the Arcana that you know. So as I level up and get the chance to gain focuses, I can choose Fire or Heroic, which add the normal +2 bonus. A focus gives you +2 to the appropriate ability when you make a check for that ability. Each of the spells that I know have a different target number that I have to beat by rolling 3d6 and adding intelligence, and if I have the appropriate focus, then I also get the focus bonus. Different spells have different target numbers. Typically, the more powerful spells that are learned later in an Arcana have higher numbers. For example, in my Fire Arcana, Arcane Lantern, I only need to roll an 8 or higher. Flame Blast and Burning Shield, which I can learn later, I have to get a 12 or higher. And then Firestorm, which is the most powerful, has a 15 or higher. Each spell also has a spell type, attack, defense, utility, enhancement. It has an MP or magic point cost, and I'll tell you shortly how many magic points my character has. It has a casting time, which tells you what type of action it requires, the target number, and then if there is a test to resist it, it tells you what the test is, and it also tells you versus spell power. And spell power is a number that is equal to 10 plus my willpower, which is 2, and then if I have an Arcana focus, I add that. So in most cases, my spell power will be 12. If anyone gets to make a test to resist the spell, they have to beat a 12. The stunt mechanic, which like I said, I'll explain a little bit at the end. With that mechanic, it is possible to increase spell power on a casting by casting basis. But since I've gotten the 2 Arcana talents and noted down my spells, I'm going to go back to the Mage and finish up the first level class powers for the Mage. So, magic points. You use magic points or MPs to power your spells. You start with a number of magic points equal to 10 plus my willpower plus a d6. So let's roll a d6 and hope I get better than the 1 I rolled for my health. I don't. So that means that I have 13 magic points. And don't worry, that goes up as I level. Basically, each time that I level up, I gain an additional magic points equal to my willpower plus another d6 until I reach level 10. And then from level 11 to 20, I only get my willpower in bonus That's just to keep the power from scaling too far out of range and making all of your spells, letting you afford all of your spells all of the time. And then finally, I get to choose a third talent in addition to my 2 magical talents, and it has to be either I never know how to spell this word. It's chirurgy or chirurgy or whatever. It's a medicine ability. Linguistics or lore. And I will turn to chapter 3 to tell me what those actually mean. Talents. Here we go. So the medical one, I have to have the intelligence healing focus, which I do not have, so I will not be getting that talent. Then linguistics, I need to have an intelligence of 1 or better. I have. Or lore, I need to have an intelligence of 2 or higher. Now the thing about lore is, at the first level, all it does is give you a bonus when you're using a lore focus, which is any intelligence focus that has the word lore in it. Now you'll notice on my character sheet, I do not have any lore focus, so I'm not going to pick that. I am instead going to choose linguistics, and at novice level it says you learn an additional language from the following list: elf, dwarf, gnome, halfling, human, or orc. So all of the racial languages. And again, it gives a note that if the GM is using their own setting or a pre-existing setting, that they'll have a different list of options. But for now, I'm just going to take what's in the book. And I'm going to choose elf because elves tend to be magical, and this orc probably thinks that elf language has some sort of magical sound to it and likes it, or just grew up in a situation where they needed to learn elf, and so they learned elf. So I'm going to add elf to my list. I'm going to note down that I have the linguistics talent at novice. Now let's go back to the creating your character in 9 easy steps. So I have gotten through step 5. I have jotted down everything for my class. Now I can move on to pick your starting equipment. Starting equipment. My starting money is determined by my social class, so since I am lower class, I get silver pieces, which is the default currency for Fantasy Age, equal to 25 plus 3d6. So let's roll 3d6. And I get 7, so I have 32 silver pieces. And then I can go to the equipment chapter and start spending that money. I'm sorry, there's also starting equipment in addition to the silver pieces that I get. I always forget that step. So everybody that is an adventurer gets a backpack, traveler's garb, and a water skin. That's just standard equipment. If I am a mage, I get 1 weapon and an arcane device. So since my arcane device is a staff is already a weapon, but I get to pick an additional one. And since I am proficient in staves, which I get for my arcane device, brawling, which doesn't require any equipment, and bludgeons, I'm going to choose a bludgeon. So I'm going to find the bludgeons group. I can choose from a mace, a maul, or a two-handed maul. A mace does 2d6 damage, plus my strength if I'm trained in the weapon group, which I am. So I will be doing an additional +2 with any bludgeons group. Real quick, because I'm proficient in brawling, if I just punch someone, I do a d3 plus my strength. So I do a d3 +2. If you're not familiar with the d3, it's basically you take a d6 and have it. So if you roll a 1 or a 2, it's 1 point. If you roll a 3 or a 4, it's 2 points. If you roll a 5 or a 6, it's 3 points. Or if you're a super nerd and have actually gotten your hands on a D3, which is typically a cube that has been labeled 1 to 3 twice, then you can just use that. There are also funny-sided ones from specialty dice makers, but that's harder to describe without just showing you one, and I don't have one readily at hand at the moment. But if I need to punch someone, then I do a D3 plus my strength. But going back to the bludgeons, a mace does 2d6 plus my strength. It has a minimum strength requirement of 1, which I meet, and it costs 12 silver pieces. A maul does a d6 plus 3. It has a minimum strength of 1, and it does 14 silver pieces. Now, comparing those two, in theory, the mace will do, on average, a half of a point of damage more than the maul. However, I like the minimum damage of the maul better. If the mace, I could potentially roll snake eyes and get a 2. With the maul, if I roll a 1, I still get 4. So I'm going to just take a maul, which is a hammer, like a war hammer kind of thing, I think. I'm going to note that it does 1d6 plus 3 damage, and that I don't spend the 14 silver pieces because it's part of my starting equipment, which I will go back to the starting equipment page. One of the things you will run into in a lot of games, especially when you're dealing with equipment lists and whatnot, is that you'll be flipping back and forth between pages. But what are you going to do? If you are a rogue, I am not a rogue. If you are a warrior, I am not a warrior. If you choose a bow or a crossbow, I did not. If you have a weapon and shield talent, I do not. So that's it. So I still have my 32 silver pieces worth of equipment. So now I get to go back to the equipment chapter again and look at various assorted adventuring gear. And there's a nice table. I could get a bedroll. I could get a blanket, candles. I don't need candles. I have dark sight. And arcane lantern if I need that. So I am going to get a bedroll, because this guy wants at least a little bit of comfort when he's on the road. I will... So that spent 10 of my silver pieces, so I still have 22 left to spend. I think this fella might have a little bit of a gambler in him, so I'm going to get... Ooh, no, dice are 20 silver pieces. That's a lot of money. No, I'm not going to get the dice. I will get... Ooh, get a small tent for 10 more silver pieces. I'll get 20 yards of rope for 2. Let me just check what their conversion rates are for money. It's the classic D&D model. 1 gold piece equals 10 silver pieces. 1 silver piece equals 10 copper, so 1 gold equals 100 copper. Because some of the things on this list are in copper, some of them are in gold, but most of them are in silver. I'm going to take some incense. You never know when that might come in handy. Which means I have 8 silver pieces left to spend. I'll get a couple of spikes for the classic adventuring spiking the door open. So that'll be a total of 1 silver piece. I'm going to get a compass. So that seems like a smart thing to have. Oh, that's 5 gold pieces. No, I won't be getting the compass. I'll get a piece of chalk for 2 copper pieces, which means I have 6 silver, 8 copper left. You know what? I'm going to get 2 pieces of chalk. And I am going to get 2 candles, because even though I don't need the light, I'm sure I can find some use for those. And if nothing else, it looks cool when I'm doing magic-y stuff. That's 5 copper pieces. And there's not really anything else on here that I would want that I can actually afford. So I'm just going to have 6 silver and 1 copper piece left over as spare change. So now I will go back to the 9 easy steps. I've completed step 6. Now I can calculate defense. Go to the defense page. My defense is equal to 10 plus my dexterity bonus, which is 2, plus a shield bonus if applicable, which it is not. I do not have a shield. So my defense is a 12. That is the number that enemies need to roll to hit me. Pick a name. Well, that's something I can worry about later. They don't really have any good examples. The last step is to pick goals and ties. Again, that's something I would want to do later if I had a better idea of what the campaign was and who the other characters are, that sort of thing. So basically, I am done with this character. So going over, this is an orc mage level 1. For my abilities, I have +2 accuracy with a focus in brawling. So when I go to punch somebody, I get a total of +4 to hit them. I have communication 0 with a focus in bargaining. Constitution +2 with a focus in stamina. Dexterity +2. Fighting +0. Intelligence +2. Perception +2. Strength +2. And willpower +2. One thing that I forgot to make a note of is my maul. Did I skip? Yes, I did. My maul. Bludgeons are the fighting group, so I have the +2, or +0 rather, which means that with my maul, I have a +0 to hit. And then with staves, it's a quarter staff, so it does 1d6 +1. It is, however, an accuracy weapon, so I have +2 for my accuracy to hit with it. Which is great. I am not the greatest to hit, but luckily I have all those heroic spells which are better for buffing people, so if I really need to, I can cast, for instance, Hero's Inspiration, which gives a +2 to the next ability test that I make, which could very well be a test to hit somebody with my maul or my staff. or in fact my Arcane Blast. But going back, I've got 23 health points, I've got 13 magic points, I've got a defense of 12, I have dark sight out to 20 yards, my speed is 12. That's the number of yards that I can go when I move. I speak the elf language, Orcish, and Common Tongue. I have the bludgeons, brawling, and staves weapon groups. For my class powers, I have the Arcane Blast. I can use a staff as my arcane device. I have Fire Arcana, Heroic Arcana, and Linguistics talents, all at novice level. The 2 Arcanas give me 4 spells. And then I've got some equipment and some spare change at the end. So there you are. That is a Fantasy Age character. I'd like to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the show, you can follow me on Twitter at Paul Stefko. Make sure to like the video, favorite it, subscribe wherever you're watching it. And if you really like it and want to support this show, as well as blog posts that I put up at oneyardhex.blogspot.com, you can support me via Patreon at my Patreon campaign at patreon.com/paulstefko. I'm also on Google Plus and Facebook. I'm Paul Stefko in those places. I post daily polls for the week's upcoming episode, starting Mondays and continuing through as necessary. If you want to take part in those, follow me on Twitter and on Google Plus. I put polls in both of those places, and then I collate the responses from both to create the charts. But that's all for now. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I will see you later.